things over to you, Brooke and Chelsea.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here with us on this afternoon. We're really excited to share with you our presentation and our associated guide. So before I get started, I do want to highlight our Seton Hall Data Services team. So we launched this new data services department within the library, and it's made up of library staff and faculty that are available to do overall workshops on a variety of softwares. If you need us to come to your classrooms, we can do that as well. We can also do one-on-one consultations with members of the SHU community, whether it's for your courses or whether it's for maybe a personal project. Say you're an entrepreneur and you need to look at demographic data, we can help you with that as well. You can book appointments on our website, or you can email us, whatever is easiest for you. You can go to the next slide, Brooke. These are the supported softwares that we have. This is not an exhaustive list. This list continues to grow year by year. We're really excited about the support from the Seton Hall community. And as we get requests, we're looking into how we can better support you all. We just got a campus-wide license to Stata. So if you need any assistance with that, you can reach out to us. We also do SPSS, R, and we have a few licenses for Atlas TI. So if you need any help with that, again, reach out. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, so we're really excited for how this is going to grow. So again, we want to thank Seton Hall and all of you for your support today. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what we are all here for. Welcome, everyone. This is the presentation during Love Data Week for Algorithmic Bias and Data Ethics. My name is Chelsea Barrett. I am the business librarian here at Seton Hall, and I'm also a member of the data services team and an avid user of data. And you will find that you are all also avid users and sharers of data. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, it will become very clear to you. And Brooke, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Brooke Duffy, and I am the coordinator of instruction librarian here. And throughout the presentation, you'll hear about my interest and involvement with this topic, which is, just growing and starting. But I'm going to share a few resources that got me interested in this topic.
Great, great. Okay. So to begin our discussion on algorithmic bias, we must first discuss what an algorithm is. So defined by ADL.org, an algorithm is a detailed set of instructions to reach a result based on given inputs, data, or information. So to put this into context, we have to think about a few algorithms that you know or have heard of. So there are the voice assistant by Amazon Alexa and the Google search engine. So Brooke, if you want to just tap twice so they can show up on the screen. Perfect. So these are algorithms that you all come into contact with just about every day. If you have an Alexa in your house or an Amazon Echo, this is an algorithm. So there are other similar algorithms that you also may come in contact with. YouTube uses an algorithm, Spotify uses an algorithm, and all other areas where you get recommended songs or websites, they're all using data and they have a detailed set of instructions to create that result. So you may not even realize how steeped into data you already are. So these particular algorithms use something called machine learning, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth about in a later slide. But it's an indication to you that algorithms are all around you. So as we go through this presentation, ask yourself this question: can the algorithms around me be biased? And what examples can you think of? We're going to go through a few, but it may be interesting if you see anything that is similar to what we've listed here or anything else related. So you can go to the next slide, Brooke. Thank you.
So along those lines, just to pose a question to start out with, can data be biased? With this definition of bias being an inclination or predisposition for or against something. And so we just like to pose that question to our audience here today. you probably feel like that's maybe a leading question given where you are today. But let's maybe have a couple discussion points on whether you agree that data can be biased or whether you disagree, and what are some potential examples of biased data that you can think of. And Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind facilitating, since I can't see our participants in my screen.
Sure. All right, so I don't see anyone commenting, but
Okay.
maybe this is something that people can just think about as we're going through.
Yeah, sure. Or another way we could try this is, do folks in the chat feel as though data can be biased? And if you agree, just raise your hand.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Is it lighting up like a Christmas tree?
It really did, and that was pretty impressive.
Okay. Awesome.
We have about 11 hands go up, so, and Jerry says yes, so Jerry agrees.
Okay, all right, wonderful. So, be thinking about particular examples that you may have encountered and why you feel that way. And if you think of anything, feel free to put it into the chat as we go along.
Okay, so what can cause data to be biased? I think this kind of answers what Brooke's question was, but data can become biased very easily. And one of the reasons is algorithm creation. So those who have created algorithms, they may have unintentional implicit bias or preconceived notions about people or concepts while creating these algorithms. This is a dangerous type of bias because unless it's checked, it can do way more harm than good. And that's something that we don't want because the implications of that can be drastic for a lot of populations. And we'll go into a little bit more of that later on. There's also the matter of machine learning, which I mentioned in a previous slide. So machine learning algorithms use statistical analysis within data to find relevant patterns in order to grow in its functionality. So it's kind of like this self-growing thing that is monitored by people. So the data that machine learning uses is anything that can be stored or collected digitally. So your information when you go on websites and they say, can we collect your data? That is they're probably going to try and use it for machine learning capabilities or even to just use data to make data-driven decisions. So if the algorithm is exposed to flawed data, that can negatively affect the output. And as it's growing, it's going to use that information as the base. And that can be extremely dangerous as it grows. And then data can also be biased intentionally. So there are currently algorithms in place they're set to detect if a person is wearing a mask during this pandemic. So there are so many implications that may follow. If you think about any implications of maybe other similar, data type things that may come about, that really may scare some people. That's why it's important that we have something to kind of bring this together. So if you can go to the next slide, Brooke.
Yeah, and just one quick note too. When we were talking over these points yesterday, I was thinking to myself, intentional bias. Can I think of any, intentionally biased data sets? And one came to mind pretty quickly, which was, in this past year with all of the different COVID data sets that have been gathered by, various medical organizations, government organizations. There was the big issue with I believe it was the Florida state portal for COVID data, and the woman who was managing that, who was trying to put the real data down, and the government was saying, no, please don't present it that way, or don't, lay it all out that way, because it was making the COVID cases appear dramatically high, which they actually were. So that's, an intentional, manipulation of a data set.
Exactly. And you can see how scary that is, right? So we have something, well, not we didn't create this, but there is something called data ethics. And it's important to talk about data ethics because, talking about how data can become biased and the implications, it's a little scary. So Michelle Knight from dataversity.net put this in a very simple but profound way. Data ethics describes a code of behavior, specifically what is right and wrong. And this seems to be the code of ethics for a lot of different things. You know, what is right and wrong? That's the point of ethics. But when you add the data onto it, data encompasses a lot. So this covers a lot of areas that you may not even realize affect you. And as you've seen in the previous slide, it's not always the norm that data ethics are upheld. So, as data continues to grow and our capacity to analyze, understand, and utilize that data grows, data will continue to encompass our everyday lives. And we hope to stress to you today how important it is that you understand what's happening with the data all around you, how it can affect you, and how you can move forward as a well-aware data user and sharer.
So I mentioned at the beginning that, this is a topic that I'm beginning to study, and it's becoming something very interesting to me. And my first, introduction to this topic was through the work of Sophia Umoja Noble, who's the author of the fantastic book, Algorithms of Oppression, which we do have listed out on our data literacy and ethics guide. So we'll share that link with you at the end in case you want to follow up and read that book. I thought we could start by watching her speak in her own words. This is from a TED Talk she did a few years ago, where she talks about the research that she has done about the mechanisms behind some seemingly racist search results that she was finding when she was doing some Google searches. So I'm going to attempt to share a couple minutes of this with you. Let me just move over. Okay. And somebody please chime in and tell me if you can hear this in a second.
I first wrote about
Yes.
the impact of search engine results and how they misrepresent women and girls in 2011. And shortly thereafter, I'd say about 3 months later, the algorithm changed for Black girls. And Black girls and pornography are no longer the first page of information in Google. Not so for Asian girls. Not so for Latinas. So we have work to do. Search engines are amazing tools for us, but what we don't see are the ethical dilemmas, the biases that are inherently built into them, the ways in which money influences the kinds of results that we get. It's not just about popularity. It's about credibility too. So what happens when we look for more specific information? Information that can help us tell us something about other people. When I do searches on why are X types of people so, these are the kinds of results that I get. Why are Black people so loud, athletic, lazy? We don't see words like intelligent, prolific, amazing. A girlfriend of mine, Diane, about a year ago, posted to Facebook and she said, "What's happened? Did Hitler just take over Google?" She was doing a search for something beautiful because she wanted some scenes of nature for her desktop wallpaper. And when she did a search for beauty, this is what she got. This is what's beautiful. I expect, in fact, when I do a search for beautiful, to see a beach and a paradise, because that's what's beautiful to me. Part of what this tells us is that no matter the ways in which offline we are trying to make sense of our values, we're trying to redefine beauty standards, they get replicated, instantiated, in fact, in some of our most important technologies. Now,
okay, so that's just a little taste of, her research and her work, but, hopefully it kind of gives you a kind of an introductory sense of, what some of the issues out there are. And her book, Algorithms of Oppression, actually is a deep dive into the developers of the algorithms behind the Google search, and why and how there might be some really extreme bias in those algorithms themselves that lead to these types of results.
So as you can see, algorithmic bias has really big implications, because if you think about maybe a child Googling beauty and that's what they see, it gets ingrained, and then there's so many other implications. So a few of you put into the chat, thank you, by the way, some examples of what you thought would be similar to algorithmic bias. And a few that I wanted to highlight, and Brooke's going to highlight Google Image, online job recruitment. There have been many issues with algorithms actually hindering people from getting hired in certain places. So to put this into context, if you think about Amazon, right, one of the biggest companies ever, they had to discontinue the use of an algorithm after there was immense gender bias revealed. So the workforce was comprised of 60% males, with 74% of males holding managerial positions. And this is according to brookings.edu. And they realized that the algorithm had data that was coming from a predominantly male workforce. So there were words that were causing the resumes to get discarded, the resumes of women. So if it had women's university or anything relating to women, it was either put at a lower echelon in the process or it was discarded completely. So after this was revealed, Amazon had to go in and rectify that algorithm. So thinking about people who have applied for jobs and thinking about all the times you were rejected and you didn't know why, it's entirely possible that that might be an issue, right? And if it continues, that can really implicate a population, whether it's a gender, an age group, a race. So there's so many implications there. And I believe someone touched on criminal justice algorithms. That's a very big one, and that's usually the first place my mind goes to. There's actually an algorithm. It was called the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions algorithm. And it was used by judges to predict whether defendants should be detained or released on bail. And it was found to be extremely biased against African Americans. So it would assign a score. It was a risk score. And the higher the risk, the more you would be denied bail. So that's something that can, be attributed to the prison system and how there's so much injustice steeped in that. So how long has that algorithm been detecting? I mean, how long has it been, affecting these people? That's really scary, right? So there's also advertisements on social media. And I'm kind of blazing through these because I think you all know that there are so many implications that can follow. But if you think about, sometimes I saw on social media the other day, I had a conversation with my mom about detergent, and I went on Instagram and I saw an advertisement for that same detergent. And, you kind of think to yourself, how do they know these things about me? Well, it's because of the data. If you searched for detergent, they can see that and they can use that to structure the advertisements. So just think about that a little bit. Like, I don't want it to make it seem like it's like very Big Brother and scary, but it's something to consider, that it's all around you, it's happening, and hopefully it's in your favor. The algorithmic bias is not, present, but it can occur. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And Brooke, I know you're going to talk about Google image searches.
Yeah, and I'm probably on a different side of the coin. I'm like, it is kind of Big Brother-ish, it is, and we'll talk a little bit more about, how these, trackers evolve on Facebook specifically in a few slides, but it's extremely invasive, and that's something to consider and think about. But with the Google image searches, Sophia Noble talked a little bit about how, she was doing Google searches, and thankfully when you search Black girls now, the top results are not pornography, because there was criticism about that and Google responded and changed their algorithm. But there still are examples that you can find of biased results that come up on Google. So one result, and I will bring this over for you right now, I'm going to expand this, is the search result for nurse. And I'm going to scroll a little bit through these. I'm going to just ask the audience, what do you notice about these images? Or the majority of them, should I say? Anything that's coming to mind in the top results? The top results, if anyone hasn't responded yet, are mostly women. They're almost all women, and they are, largely white women, but they're largely women. There are a few examples of people of different backgrounds, and there are a few men. But yeah, I mean, this is one example. So let's do another search.
Brooke, before you go, a
Yes.
few people in the comments have said they're female, almost all white women, mostly women, and Jay Leibowitz said not a lot of diversity, which is interesting.
Yes, it is interesting. So I'm going to do another one now. I'm going to do a search for programmer. And we're going to notice some things here too.
We got not many women at all.
Yeah, exactly. So why is this? I picked up on this tip from another TED Talk in which his name is escaping me right now, but it's in our sources. But he pointed out that these particular searches result in these very kind of traditionally oriented stereotypes about these professions, and that comes from data mining of news articles. So this information is pulling from news articles in which it was very common images of these professions, and even mentions of gender, race, etc. So it's kind of interesting. And think about this as we continue to go on through the rest of the results today about, well, how does this affect us? How does this affect our minds? How does this affect our own internal biases when we see things like this over and over again? And so we will go to our next slide. And this is diving a little bit further into one of the topics that came up in the chat, and also Chelsea mentioned about criminal justice and algorithmic bias, and the already well underway systemic problems with that. So this quote about facial recognition technology from the late US Representative Elijah Cummings: if you're Black, you're more likely to be subjected to this technology, and the technology is more likely to be wrong. That is an unfortunate reality, and I'm going to bring you directly to our guide in just a second, where we have, this is our page specifically on law enforcement use of data and using that for criminalization. So there are a ton of really useful articles and different resources like mapping police violence out there, Dataface. These are all really great resources to check into. I'd like to highlight this top result here about Palantir. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. It's a criminal forecasting company, a data company that has been working with New Orleans, but also a lot of other cities, including the New York Police Department, the Los Angeles Police Department, to provide a predictive policing technology. And basically what it does is it uses public records court filings, licenses, addresses, phone numbers, and social media data to create their algorithm, which then provides police forces with, this data and the use of that data to make decisions about, pursuing someone for a charge. There's no regulation on this right now. Another example of that is um, facial recognition technology. And under racial bias here, this is a crossover, but another fantastic TED Talk to watch is the one by Joy Buolamwini. And she is fantastic. She's both an artist and a graduate student and a coder. And she's testified in front of Congress about facial recognition technology. She is really on the front lines of investigating this. And she discovered through her own research that her face was not recognized, was not coming up on the facial recognition technology that is primarily used by almost all entities that use it. And so she talked a little bit and talked about why is this based on the training sets they use, the different faces that they actually use to analyze and create what an average or normal face looks like. There's a lack of diversity in those sets. Something that she pointed out that's very scary is that 1 in 2 adults have their faces, 1 in 2 American adults have their faces in facial recognition technology systems. And police departments can use those tools without regulation currently. So another book that she recommends, which is on our list of recommended books, is Weapons of Math Destruction, math as in arithmetic. And it talks about the kind of unmediated adoption of algorithms for so many different decision-making tools and processes in our modern day society.
So this is an interesting slide, and Brooke and I had a field day going through this because it was something that I didn't know, and I found it to be very interesting. So Facebook apparently makes assumptions on you based on your data. So if you were to try this, these are the instructions. If you go to your Facebook and you go to settings and privacy and you follow all of these instructions until you get to categories used to reach you, you're going to be brought to a page that has all of this information on the data that they're using, who they're, targeting the advertisements towards, and what interests you have. So they've assumed so many things about you. And when I went through my list, it was pretty frightening because I'm not an avid poster on Facebook at all, and I don't put a lot of information on there. But based on what I've liked, what I've commented on, and potentially what I've searched, they were able to assume my political affiliation, my age, the people around me, what I like to do in my spare time. It was pretty frightening because, again, these are things that were not divulged by me. These are things that the algorithms were able to pick up based on what I was doing. So I would urge all of you just to see how, algorithms work and the implications that can come about. Just take a look at your Facebook settings if you do have a Facebook and try this out and see what comes up and see how accurate it might be, because mine was pretty accurate. I mean, they knew the level of what do I do in my spare time? What television shows do I like? And it was very interesting. So again, I'm urging you all to do it because it was a very interesting thing for me to do.
Yeah. I'm seeing if I can pull mine up right now because even though this is very personal, hey, Facebook has it, so it's not that personal, right? So let's see. Yeah, I went through. Apparently, I'm really into the Rachel Maddow show, which is funny because I don't remember ever having watched it. Um, this is accurate. I love Hocus Pocus, the 1993 film. I love Halloween and camping. So, but you can keep scrolling through here, and these are all of the ad topics that Facebook thinks I'm into. So, I mean, it just keeps going forever. Facebook has just been spying on me and, watching all these things that I'm interested in. I do love Dream Pop, that's true. So yeah, I think it's interesting for everyone to take a peek at and see what data Facebook is collecting about you. And I also thought it would be interesting to do a little bit of a deeper dive into where does this information come from and why. So a really, really good, I cannot recommend this enough, that episode of Reply All, the podcast about the internet called Is Facebook Spying on Me? It's 3 years old, so it is not the most recent thing in algorithms or data ethics, but they just do such a really good job of explaining how that algorithm works in terms of where is Facebook getting these categories from. So they talk a little bit about something called Facebook Pixel, which is an ad tracker that they've used since 2012, which is embedded on millions of other websites outside of Facebook. So when you are on outside of Facebook on other websites, those sites are reporting back to Facebook to tell Facebook what you're looking at, what you're putting in your shopping carts, information that Facebook can use to tailor their ads and their algorithms to make their product more addictive and more appealing to you. They also have data brokers that they use to collect personal information about you. So they use information from credit bureaus. They use information about your marital status, your legal information, and they use this to break down into those categories or those individual traits that I just showed you for me. And they also do a ton when it feels like Facebook is listening to you. They may be, but they also use their location tracking services on you. And there is so much that they can tell about what stores you're near or in, what neighborhoods you're visiting, what neighborhoods you live in, all of that. So it really, and who comes into your orbit and interacts with you too. One last anecdote about this Reply All episode, which again is really comprehensive. They told a story about a man who had very liberal leanings, and he, had a very conservative brother-in-law. But they interacted a lot on Facebook. Try not to, get involved with each other's political posts, but liking things about, general life, family, funny things, whatever. So the liberal guy started to get some ads targeted towards him that were from right-wing groups, and he felt as though they had some white nationalist content in them. And he just couldn't figure out why, because he didn't have anyone in his circles and he didn't, interact with any content like that. Finally, on a hunch, he talked to his brother-in-law and he said, do you know anything about this? And his brother-in-law said, yeah, actually, I got to tell you something. And the brother-in-law for a while had been frequenting some white pride groups. And just because the original guy was, interacting with the content of someone else with very different leanings, he was getting ads, political ads targeted to him based on their association and their, their likes, their clicks. So that's just something to think about in terms of like, why are certain things happening in our country right now? Why are certain things happening so quickly and political polarization happening so quickly? When you think about an anecdote like that, it makes it a little bit clearer.
Okay, so some of the implications of algorithmic bias and artificial intelligence. So as the world of artificial intelligence continues to grow, with Alexa becoming a presence in almost every home, there are some implications that you may want to consider. Though only a few are listed here on this page, I want you to think about what it may mean for you as technology continues to grow, as our phones become more advanced, as there are more platforms to work on. So there's something called an ALA conference, which is the American Library Association conference. And this year, there was a librarian, Ian Kitajima, the director of corporate development at Oceanit in Hawaii, and he showed a demonstration where a virtual assistant had a real conversation with a hair salon as it set up a hair appointment for a CEO. The conversation sounded so real, and the person on the phone couldn't tell the difference. There was even a point where the AI tool said, oh, wait, no, forget that date. Let's move on to another date. And it was almost bizarre to everyone watching because we started to think about the implications of this. Has it already been implemented? Have we been talking to people or have we been talking to AI? So that is a huge, what does that mean going forward? If you no longer talk to people, now you're talking to AI, but you don't know. So that's something to think about. And I wish I could show the video, but it's pretty long, but it's really profound. There can also be an increase in racial bias and even potentially accessibility issues. There are currently issues with, AI and algorithms not being able to correctly identify people who are disabled, people who are a certain color or a certain race. So what does that mean going forward? How do we identify these people, these populations, when these algorithms continue to dictate more? Because I'm anticipating that data is going to really encompass almost every facet of our lives. And if that's the case, these things need to be addressed, these things need to be monitored, and these things need to be understood by all members of the community because it's affecting everyone at this point. As you saw with the very disturbing examples that, Brooke shared with us, Facebook is doing some things and you may not even realize. So again, this is not an exhaustive list of the implications, but these are three that really put into context what it may mean as AI and algorithmic bias may continue to grow, unfortunately. So we'll see how that goes. So you can go to the next slide, Brooke.
Okay. All right. So looking at the time, we are running down, and I want to leave some time for questions. But just we wanted to leave on, a note that's, what actions can we take? What can we do from here? I think a really important step is just being aware of our own implicit or unconscious biases. And that's obviously easier said than done because there's a reason that they're implicit and unconscious. And, it's not something that's easy to really interrogate. This video clip by Valerie Alexander is phenomenal. She starts out with an activity in which she asks you to, go through a series of just places in your mind, like getting onto an airplane out of breath and you just made it onto the airplane and the captain comes out. And what does the captain look like in your mind's eye? And then if you go to a conference and you see someone presenting at the conference on, this topic, what do they look like? Or if they're a computer programmer, what do they look like? So this video is a really good resource for beginning to do that kind of work. And I also just want to point out too, it's not just, white folks that have implicit or unconscious biases. Everyone has implicit and unconscious biases. And Sophia Noble, in her book and her TED Talk, she mentions the doll test, which is a famous psychological study of Black infants and babies and toddlers. And Mamie Phipps Clark and Kenneth Clark, this test, which basically determined that Black children favored white dolls. And what that meant, this was in the 50s. This was used as evidence in the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case. So just to be aware of that. And we're going to end on a couple of other ways and resources that you can think about for confronting data bias specifically. So be skeptical. Treat all the digital information in your life that you interact with, including data sets, data visualizations, studies you use that are based on data. Beyond that, your personal data, think about all of it with a critical eye. We can't just take things at face value. We're seeing now how more and more how that can be, can have very problematic results. Be inclusive. So if you're, developing a project, think about the partners and developers, particularly the coders who you are working with, and make sure that you have some gender diversity and some color diversity too in terms of who you're working with. You can also go beyond in terms of the information that you interact with. You can kind of find the courage to interrupt and say, hey, this is a great project, but I noticed that it left out X, Y, and Z groups, or that it harms X, Y, and Z groups, or no one of a certain subset of the population was involved in creating this information, and where some of those implicit biases might be. Another fantastic resource is Joy Buolamwini's Algorithmic Justice League, which is an advocacy group that is very much dedicated to confronting data bias through scientific and creative pathways. And the last that I will recommend for today is our anti-racist pedagogy guide, which we have created, which has a bunch of different readings and resources for you to get more educated and more inclusive and equitable in the work that you do. Okay, Chelsea.
Sorry about that, I was muted. But this is our data ethics and literacy guide that we created, myself, Brooke, and our colleague, Caitlin Kane-Muni. And this is a really interesting guide because we all had ideas and we all wanted to just put everything in here. But for the sake of time, I can't go through everything, unfortunately, but we do have tabs on education, law enforcement, and privacy, and gender bias and racial bias. So definitely take a look if you have time. But as Brooke has brought up here, we do have a plethora of data ethics. Sorry, Brooke, you kind of took it away.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. We have some data ethics titles here as well, if you wanted to view them. Brooke highly recommends Algorithms of Oppression. It is one of the books that really spurred this this guide. So definitely take a look at the titles here. If you have anything you would like to recommend, please let us know, because we want this to continue to grow as data continues to grow as well. And Brooke's highlighting a few more things here, more readings, etc. Do you want to add to that? Okay.
Oh, I'll just mention that this book too is the one that Joy Buolamwini recommended about weapons of mass destruction. And this is another one that I haven't read it yet, but I've heard it's highly recommended.
Great. So that is our presentation just about. So if you can, perfect. We wanted to thank you for coming. We will post this recording to our guide as well if you want to reference this. And those are our emails if you have any questions you want to refer to us. And thank you so much for your time and attention. We have a question from Jay Leibowitz. I don't know if you wanted to speak.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chelsea and Brooke. Very informative. Seems to be a hot topic. I think I mentioned in the chat, I just heard a few hours ago another talk by Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee, who heads up the Center for Technology Innovation at Brookings in Washington, D.C. And she might be a good reference as well. I just wanted to say, when in teaching last semester our undergraduate business statistics course. It's geared for sophomores. The first assignment they have to do is to find a data ethics article and critique it. And I wish I knew about all the things you have in the library. That would have been, a good resource. So in the future, I'll definitely point the students to what you're collecting in the library on data ethics.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
We really appreciate that. And we'll definitely take you up on that reference as well. So thank you. And it's good to see you, Jay. It's always good to see you.